All right, so we are talking about the obvious headline of the day, but there are several other things that are going on right now. So everyone stay put because trade talks kicked off in Beijing, and as the U.S. looks to strike a deal with China, well, one potential presidential candidate calls President Trump's foreign policy a complete disaster. Yahoo Finance's Julia LaRoche spoke with former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, and here's what he had to say.
Well, unlike Russia, who is an enemy of the United States, my belief is China is not an enemy, but a fierce competitor. And their competitive drive right now is to displace us as the #1 economic power in the world. And that threatens a whole host of issues, not the least of which is our national security. I think this president has gotten almost everything wrong with regard to understanding the mentality, the motivation of the Chinese. And the current trade and tariff war has resulted in a consumer tax on goods and services, a significant problem for anyone who's in the agriculture and farming business, for the steel industry, and those markets are not coming back anytime soon. I think, I look at the last couple of years, how this president has dealt with North Korea, in which we need China's cooperation. All of this is wrong. And so, the Chinese, in many ways, it is in the Chinese interest to work with America, to partner with America on things that we have common interest in. Now, we do have issues in terms of the humanity of how people in China, certain people in China are treated. We certainly have issues with the monetary system of China. We have issues of trade. I get all that. But you're not going to be able to solve these problems as a bully in the neighborhood. We're talking about statesmanship, diplomacy. We're talking about building trust. There's no trust between President Xi and President Trump because President Trump can't be trusted.
What would you do if you walked into the Oval Office inheriting some of these policies that he will have implemented with China?
Well, I've said publicly that if I was president, one of the first things I do is I would be on a global tour restoring the trust and confidence with almost every global leader that President Trump has insulted, and the fracturing of the relationship of all of our allies, and to ensure the fact that America can be trusted again. I would immediately bring us back into TPP so that we are engaged as a participant in economic trade, so that economic trade comes back to America. That goes back to the economic growth of this country. But the way this president has isolated us from the rest of the world, the way this president has decided to leave Syria unilaterally, a huge mistake, allowing Russia and Iran an opportunity to have a stronghold in the Middle East, not good for Jordan, not good for Israel, but most importantly, Russia now has a place, a significant strengthhold in that region. So our entire foreign policy under this president, to me, has been a disaster.
And the correspondent who actually scored that interview, Julia LaRoche, joins us now. And in addition to what we just heard, what else stuck out to you in your discussion with Howard Schultz? He hasn't declared yet.
He has not declared, but if there was anything that was a big takeaway from me, it's the question around if he was elected, what would he do with his shares of Starbucks? He's the single largest shareholder. We know that because he's the founder of the modern Starbucks as we know it today. He owns about 33 million shares, a $2.7 billion stake. The stock's trading at all-time high. He said he would sell his shares. That's his first time saying that. So to me, my big takeaway, that means he's actually really serious about this run. He's exploring. He said give him about 60 days before he makes a decision. Why is that? Well, not only is he listening to American people, but it's not just a single person's decision to run for president. This is a family decision.
If he's listening to the American people, I don't know if they want him to run. I mean, it's been kind of astonishing, the negative wave that we've heard following his sort of explorations of running for president. Did you ask him about that?
We did talk about that. So he's not too worried about some people on Twitter who are obviously angry at him.
On Twitter,
I know it's not just on Twitter, but the Democrats would be scared of him running because he could very well, they argue, could be a spoiler, though he says there are 100 million Americans who did not vote in 2016. So that is true. Politics are more polarized than they've ever been. I don't know if he's going to be the only independent to declare.
Sid, I'm curious, as we look at all of these candidates who are lining up, your membership obviously has skin in the game when it comes to the trade negotiations. But when we look at the field of Democratic potential candidates, they're already dropping, hints. For instance, there was Biden, who's not declared, who then said he might pick the woman who, Abrams, from Georgia. It was a as a trial balloon, just to see how that would resonate, trying to include people of color on a ticket. Looking at someone like Howard Schultz and the rest of the lineup, are the Democrats going about this the correct way to include voices and faces we haven't seen in the past in the political game?
Sure. So since as a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, I know that we're not necessarily engaged in the political climate. That said, though, we know that the country is becoming increasingly diverse. And while corporate America looks to become increasingly diverse, you cannot expect the political climate to be isolated from the increased diverse America that we live in. And so I would expect that diversity and inclusion will be a focal point in this whole political climate, as it will be in annual shareholder meetings, as well as other major corporate gatherings.